Chapter 7. A CIA operation? "I'm not happy about this, Frank, not a bit," said Ken for the third time. The morning sun was streaming through the open window. Ken had been enjoying the sound of the birds outside and the scent of fresh-cut grass, and feeling ravenously hungry and impatient for breakfast. Suddenly Frank had been standing beside his bed. He'd gotten permission from the RN on duty to drop in early before visiting hours. An emergency had affected Ken's business, he told her, and he promised to take only 5 minutes, 10 at the most. "There's nothing to worry about," responded Frank again, reassuringly. He pulled over a chair next to the bed and sat down. "I told you Del Sasso's a Jesuit, a priest. And, they're trained to keep secrets. I trust him completely." "That's not what I'm worried about. I want that research stopped, at least for now. It's dangerous. Look at what happened to me." "You had an accident, Ken, that's all. It could have happened to anyone. Maybe you fell asleep." "I don't fall asleep at the wheel, and certainly not at 5 in the afternoon." "Come on, Frank, do you know what the witnesses said about my driving?" "I haven't heard." "I was driving like a maniac. I don't do that. I don't take chances on blind curves, drive on the wrong side of the road. There's a connection, but I can't prove it because I don't have any memory of what happened." "What state of mind was I in when I left that lab that day?" Frank seemed embarrassed by the question. He stood up and stared out the window for a moment. At last he admitted, "You were very upset. You had a bad time in trance. I should have kept you there until you calmed down, but I had no way of knowing this would happen. I don't think we should carry on any more experimentation, at least not for now, under these circumstances." "It's so out of character for you to say that. This was your magnificent obsession. Ken, Del Sasso has established a permanent contact. We're moving forward. This partnership with the Nine will accomplish everything you dreamed of and more." "Partnership? They tried to kill me." "That's a wild statement, Ken. I don't understand this sudden negativism. It's not like you at all. Del Sasso had some problems too at first. The entities told us to cut the power under the platform. The electromagnetic emanations were putting the brain hemisphere out of sync." "I don't buy that. They were trying to take over my mind." "You've become obsessed with that delusion." "It's no delusion. Look at me. That's why I'm here." Frank began to pace back and forth in growing agitation. "We could argue about that, and it wouldn't prove anything. The simple fact is that when we followed the Archon's direction and cut the power, Del Sasso tuned right in. That was the one flaw in your design. I built that equipment, and I don't want it used until I get out of here and have checked it over myself, and am satisfied that this isn't the doorway to, well, demonic possession." Frank stopped beside the bed and stared down at Ken in astonishment. "Are you out of your mind? Where did you get such a ridiculous idea? Since when did you believe in demons?" "I'm not saying I believe in them. I'm only throwing that out as a hypothesis that we can't afford to overlook." Frank made no attempt to hide his exasperation. "You keep talking like that, Ken, and I'll have to put you in a psychiatric hospital for treatment. You sound like you've got some wires crossed and jumped the track." Ken thought to himself as their eyes met, and what Ken saw frightened him. "I think you just might do it." The thought was terrifying. "I'm lying here helpless. I never knew how vulnerable a person could be, completely at the mercy of the shrinks who set the criteria for sanity in society." Frank's voice brought him back from theoretical possibilities to present reality. "Look, Ken, we have to come to an understanding. You had one goal in mind, but from the very beginning I've seen a different potential. This research is absolutely vital to the defense of the Western world. Stopping it would be an act of sabotage, treason against our country. If the Russians get this power first..." "You're paranoid about the Russians. The Cold War ended years ago. Maybe the Nine you've joined in partnership with are the ones you ought to be worried about." Again Ken thought, shall I give it to him? Will it just give him more reason to say I'm insane? After a long silence, Ken pointed to the bedside table. There's a video cassette in that drawer. I'd like you to watch it and tell me what you think. I'm sorry, Dr. Layton. You have to leave now. I've given you 11 minutes. The patient is exhausted. Layton wondered how long the nurse had been standing just behind him and what she'd heard. He opened the drawer in the bedside table and took out the video cassette. Waving the tape as he headed for the door, Ken had already dozed off again. I'm sorry, Miss Bertelli. He's just had lunch and he's taking a much-needed rest. The nurse in charge had seen Carla heading directly toward Ken's room and had hurried over to cut her off. You have to wait in the lounge down the hall until he awakens. I'll call you. But yesterday, Carla protested, they let me go into his room and sit there until he woke up. The nurse's stern expression didn't change. I won't make a sound, pleaded Carla. I want him to get his sleep as much as you do. I can't vouch for what someone let you do yesterday, said the nurse in an antiseptic tone. She seemed as unbending as her stiffly starched uniform. Dr. Inman's visiting schedule had gotten completely out of hand, and we have to restore a semblance of order. The man was practically dead 36 hours ago, you know. This is a hospital, not Grand Central Station. You've really got a grouch on duty today, Carla told Ken when he had awakened and she was finally allowed into his room. She says it's getting to be like Grand Central Station around here. How come everyone else gets in and I have to wait? Who's been here? Only Frank that I know of, and Dr. Elliot, of course. Maybe she's upset because Frank talked her into letting him come in and see me before breakfast. Why was Frank here so early? Was there something that important? Not really. He wanted to tell me what was going on, and I wasn't happy about it. I don't want any more research going on until I get out of here. He made a sort of guarded threat to have me committed to a psycho ward. Carla was furious. That doesn't surprise me. I've gotten some information about Frank that makes me suspect his motives. Did he ever tell you that he'd been with the CIA? No, but there are probably lots of things about him that he's never told me. It must have been a long time ago. He's been at Stanford for nearly 20 years. As I started to tell you yesterday before they threw me out, I've been doing some investigating, said Carla. Just imagine what was going on inside of me, wondering why you were driving on the wrong side of the highway in the path of a logging truck. Frank wouldn't cooperate. He stonewalled me, very politely but very firmly. Protecting secret research is one thing, but it was more than that. He's brought in a psychic to work with my invention. He thinks he's competing with the Russians. I heard him mention the Russians yesterday. That fits perfectly with what I found out. Listen to this. I wasn't going to let Frank sweet-talk me. I had to know what was going on over there with you in the hospital. So, on a hunch, I used some connections and got a listing of the phone calls from your lab during the time you haven't been there. At 4:10 in the afternoon, on the day of your accident, it must have been shortly after you left, he placed a call to Langley, Virginia, and there have been quite a few since. Langley? CIA headquarters? Exactly. So I did some more digging through some of my friends at the Washington Post. I found out that he wasn't just someone with casual ties, an informant perhaps, but a graduate in the mid-50s of the CIA's West Point near Williamsburg. The farm, as they called it, involved covert action training. This guy's been seriously involved for years, Ken, and obviously he still is. Maybe, not obviously. Past involvement years ago, okay, but some phone calls? That's no proof. I just don't see Frank as a CIA agent. You're not supposed to. The best agents are the ones no one would ever suspect. But parapsychology, it doesn't fit. What do you mean it doesn't fit? Darling, you know the CIA's interest in psychic research. Well, there have been some published reports, but I've never known how true they were to the actual facts. Don't be naive. Frank knows, you can be sure. And I think that's why he got involved with you in the first place. He's been teaching at Stanford all this time, protested Ken, and working with me. I've never seen anything, as long as I've known Frank, to indicate he was involved in some clandestine activity on the side. Shall I remind you where Stanford is located? Carla persisted. Right next to Silicon Valley, with one of the heaviest concentrations of foreign agents in the country. I don't think his duties at Stanford would inhibit, or rather they probably enhance, whatever role he's been playing with the CIA. You've been reading too many spy novels, sweetheart, laughed Ken. Even as he said it, however, he remembered wondering why it had been so easy to persuade Frank to join him. In fact, now that he thought about it, Frank had initiated the idea, but that hadn't seemed significant at the time. Leighton was back early that evening. A different nurse was on duty, and he didn't have any trouble getting in for his usual 5 minutes, 10 at the most. Ken was awake, feeling somewhat stronger, and trying to sort out some hard decisions, going back over what he'd seen on that terrifying video. What had Frank thought of it? What would Carla's reaction be when she saw it? Without so much as a solicitous, "How are you doing?" or a polite "Good evening." Leighton seemed in a hurry and didn't pull up the usual chair to sit down. Was this some kind of joke, he asked, waving the video cassette at Ken and then tossing it on the table beside the bed. What do you mean? It's blank, nothing. Frank, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but that's unacceptable. I'm telling you it was a blank tape. And I'm telling you it wasn't when you took it out of here. It belongs to the hospital, and it was a very important tape to me, too. I want it back. I just gave it to you. You can check it out yourself. Frustrated anger that Ken had suppressed for so long now came to the surface suddenly. Whatever you're up to, you didn't have to wipe out that tape. I know you've been through a terrible ordeal. The response came back clinical and sympathetic. You're not yourself, Ken. That's clear enough from the trouble we've had communicating since you came out of your coma. I don't want to overstay and tire you further. He pulled an envelope out of his inside coat pocket and put it on the table beside the tape. You'll want your lawyer to look this over. It's a contract for the purchase of all the equipment in the lab, including any patents and all rights of any kind, for $1.3 million. I think that's a fair price. There's a cashier's check for that amount. I'd like to pick up the signed contract tomorrow evening. Ken was stunned. Where did you get that kind of money? Is the CIA involved in this? I've made some lucky investments. Look, Ken, you want to put everything on hold, and I want to proceed. We're at a stage where it's urgent and vital to go ahead without any interruption. If you feel like getting back in when you're fully recovered and you're your old self again, nothing would please me more. I took the liberty of notifying both your CPA and attorney. They each have a copy of the contract and will be stopping by first thing in the morning. In the meantime, get some rest, old buddy, and take care. So this is a CIA operation, and if I don't agree with their terms, they've got their ways. Is that it? Frank was already walking out the door.